Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah, always exciting to be back.
So this time, we're tackling a question from one of our listeners about a movie called Dragon 2025.
Okay.
They actually sent us a couple different podcast reviews.
Okay.
And they're wondering if it's actually worth watching.
I see.
So Dragon 2025 is a Tamil film. It came out pretty recently, actually, just on February 21st of this year.
Okay.
And it seems like, from what we've heard in the reviews, it's kind of a coming-of-age comedy drama.
All right.
With this guy, Raghavan, who's nicknamed Dragon, as the central character.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And he's kind of navigating college life relationships, career aspirations, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, the classic coming of age
Exactly.
kind of setup, but it sounds like maybe with a bit of a Tamil twist.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, Dragon, what a nickname.
Right.
You know, it makes me think there's got to be some interesting stuff there.
Definitely, yeah. And both of the reviews that we got actually seem to agree that Pradeep Ranganathan, who plays Dragon, just absolutely nails it.
Oh, wow.
So it seems like a really strong performance.
So the role was like tailor-made for him?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Interesting. Okay.
And then another actor who gets a lot of praise in both reviews is Miskin, who plays the college principal.
Oh, now that's interesting. I'm familiar with Miskin. He often plays these really intense and kind of complex characters.
Right.
So I'm curious to see how that dynamic plays out between him and Dragon, you know?
Yeah.
That could be really interesting to see that classic kind of student-mentor relationship, but with, you know, a Miskin twist to it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And it sounds like maybe there could be some, fireworks there with those two actors going head-to-head a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
But, beyond the performances, both of the reviews actually highlighted how entertaining the film is.
Okay.
It sounds like the director, Ashwath Marimuthu, knows how to keep things really engaging.
That's great.
They blend humor and romance in a way that just keeps you really hooked.
Nice.
And they even praise the writing. They say that the dialogue is really sharp and that there are all these, well-placed callbacks that just make you laugh out loud.
You know, it's so easy for these coming-of-age comedies to fall into cliches and, those really predictable tropes.
Oh, for sure.
So if they're really pulling off clever writing and genuine humor, that's a big plus.
Yeah.
It means they're not just relying on, slapstick or cheesy jokes.
Exactly.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not all just fluff and laughs either.
Oh, okay.
It sounds like there's this subtle social message that's kind of woven into the narrative.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the reviews mention themes of honesty, the importance of education, parental sacrifices.
Okay.
Those kind of universal truths that I think a lot of people can connect with.
Yeah, for sure.
And they even praised Leon James's music for adding emotional depth, even if the songs aren't huge chart toppers or anything.
Right.
So it sounds like there's a lot to like about this film.
Yeah, it does sound like they've got a lot of good elements going for them. But with any film, I'm sure it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right?
Right. Yeah, no film is perfect. And both reviews do admit that there are some flaws with this one.
Okay.
The runtime seems to be a major sticking point. It clocks in at 2 hours and 37 minutes.
Ooh, that's a long one.
Yeah, and apparently the second half drags a bit.
A longer runtime isn't always a bad thing, but it does put a lot of pressure on the filmmakers to keep things moving.
Right.
If they're not careful, it can start to feel a little bloated.
Yeah.
And if these reviews are saying that the second half drags a bit,
Yeah.
it makes me wonder if there might have been some pacing issues or maybe some unnecessary subplots that could have been trimmed down.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's like, you have a delicious meal, but it's just too big.
Yeah.
And you end up feeling kind of overstuffed instead of satisfied. And speaking of things that might leave you feeling a little uncomfortable, one of the reviews mentioned some questionable scenes involving verbal abuse and almost violence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they even question whether those elements really fit with the film's overall lighthearted tone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Tone is so important in filmmaking, especially when you're dealing with sensitive subjects.
Exactly. I'm really curious, did the review say how those scenes were handled? Were they played for laughs, or was there an attempt to address the seriousness of, those actions?
They didn't really go into specifics, unfortunately. They just kind of expressed concern that those scenes might make some viewers uncomfortable, especially given the, comedic leanings of the film.
Yeah, I can see that.
I guess it really comes down to how those moments are framed and, whether the filmmakers offer any kind of counterbalance.
Absolutely. And, that kind of ties into something else that struck me about these reviews, this idea that Dragon 2025 is trying to deliver a social message while also maintaining this lighthearted vibe.
Yeah.
It's a really tough balance to strike.
It is.
Because if you're trying to make a point about honesty and education, but then your main character is engaging in questionable behavior, it could send mixed messages.
Right. Are we supposed to be rooting for Dragon even if he's cutting corners, or is the film trying to show the consequences of those choices?
Exactly.
I guess we'll have to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, it really makes you think, and I think that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating. We're getting these glimpses into the film's complexities,
Right.
but we're also left with a lot of questions, and it seems like the reviews themselves are kind of grappling with some of these contradictions, too.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of contradictions, one thing that stood out to me was the critique of the female characters.
Oh, okay.
Both reviews mentioned that the roles played by Anupama Parameswaran and Kayadu Lohar felt underdeveloped. They just didn't have the depth that would make them really memorable.
That's a little disappointing to hear, especially in a film that's trying to present a fresh take on this genre, you
Right.
know? You would hope that they would give the female characters just as much nuance and complexity as the male lead.
Exactly. I mean, relationships are such a huge part of growing up and figuring out who you are.
For sure.
So if those relationships aren't given proper attention, it can feel like a missed opportunity
It really can.
to explore like a whole other dimension of the story.
Yeah. And it also makes you wonder who this film is really speaking to.
Right?
If the female characters are kind of sidelined, does that limit the film's ability to resonate with a wider audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something to think about for sure.
Definitely.
So we've got this potentially really compelling central performance, some laughs, a bit of heart,
Yeah.
but also some pacing issues, questionable scenes, and potentially underdeveloped female characters.
It sounds like a very mixed bag.
Yeah, it's kind of like a mixed bag of movie snacks.
Okay.
You've got some tasty treats in there,
Yeah.
but some that might leave you feeling a little unsatisfied.
Right. I like that analogy. And, that brings us to the heart of what we do here on the deep dive, right?
Exactly.
We sift through the information, we weigh the pros and cons,
Right.
and ultimately we try to help you decide if something is worth exploring further.
Exactly. And in the case of Dragon 2025, it sounds like the answer isn't a simple yes or no.
It rarely is.
Right. There are definitely a lot of things to consider. And ultimately, it comes down to what you as a viewer value in a film.
Exactly.
So to help you make that decision, I think we should shift gears a bit and explore what might make Dragon 2025 stand out from the shroud.
Okay.
Does it offer anything truly unique to the coming-of-age genre?
I like it. Let's dig in and find out. Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're trying to tackle some pretty big issues,
Right.
things like honesty and ethics and education. But when you have these scenes that are kind of questionable, at least according to one of the reviews,
Yeah.
and it just makes you wonder, are they really committed to exploring those themes in a meaningful way, or is it more just kind of surface level?
Yeah, and one review specifically called out the way Dragon's transformation happened.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And said it feels really rushed and convenient, especially during the song sequences.
I see. So it's like they're trying to show this character art, but maybe they're not giving it enough time to breathe.
Right, it's like they want to have this big dramatic moment, but they also want to keep things light and fun.
Yeah, it's tough to find that balance sometimes.
It is, and it sounds like that might be one of the areas where this film stumbles a little bit.
Okay, so they're maybe not quite hitting the mark with that aspect of the story.
Right.
Anything else that stood out to you from the reviews?
Yeah, actually, another thing that both reviews mentioned was that the plot gets a little predictable in the second half.
I see. So it starts off strong, but then maybe loses a bit of steam.
Yeah, it sounds like they set up this really intriguing premise, but then they kind of fall back on some familiar tropes.
Okay, so maybe not the most original story out there.
Right, but, even if the plot is predictable, the reviews still emphasize that the film is entertaining.
Okay, so it sounds like it's still a fun watch, even if you can kind of see where things are going.
Exactly. It's like comfort food,
I can see that.
It's not going to blow your mind, but it's still enjoyable.
Right, sometimes you just want something that's familiar and easy to digest.
Exactly. And, that actually ties into another point that one of the reviews made.
What's that?
They said that the film kind of glorifies some questionable ethics.
Oh, wow. So even though they're trying to highlight the importance of things like education and honesty,
Right.
the main character might not always be the best role model.
Yeah, it sounds like Dragon cuts a few corners and bends the rules a bit in order to achieve his goals.
Interesting. So it's almost like they're sending mixed messages.
Yeah, it definitely raises some questions about what the filmmakers are really trying to say.
It does, and it makes you wonder if they're aware of those contradictions or if it's just something that kind of slipped through the cracks.
Right.
But, even with these flaws, it sounds like the film still has a lot of heart.
It does.
And it's ultimately about, this young guy trying to find his way in the world.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. So we've talked about the performances, the humor, the social message. the pacing issues,
Right.
the questionable ethics. It's been quite a ride.
It has. What do you think is the final verdict on Dragon 2025 worth watching or not? Yeah, so is this a movie we should be rushing out to see?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, it's not like a masterpiece.
Right.
But it doesn't sound like a total flop either.
Yeah, it seems like it's aiming for that sweet spot, you know?
Yeah.
A fun movie.
Entertaining, maybe makes you think a little bit.
Exactly.
But the question is, does it actually hit that target?
Right. And, if you're a fan of Pradeep Ranganathan, it sounds like his performance alone might be worth the price of admission.
Yeah, all the reviews are so positive about him.
Exactly. And if you enjoyed the director's previous film,
Oh, Mike Edebui.
yeah, then you'll probably appreciate his style here too.
Yeah, it seems like he has a certain way of blending humor and heart.
Exactly. And, it's not just about the individual elements, but how they all come together.
Right.
And it seems like this film is tapping into some really relatable themes.
Yeah, coming of age,
Exactly. Ambition, relationships.
all the cycle pressures.
All that stuff that so many young people deal with.
Exactly.
So if you're looking for a story that speaks to those experiences, this one might be worth checking out.
But let's not forget about that runtime.
Oh, yeah, almost 3 hours. That's a long one.
It is. It's a commitment.
Yeah, and if the pacing is uneven, like the reviews suggest, it could be a bit of a slog.
Yeah. And then there are those questionable scenes, too.
Right, the verbal abuse, the near violence.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if they're trying to do too much.
Trying to tackle these serious issues,
Yeah.
but also keep things light and funny.
Right. It's a tough balance to strike.
It really is, and it sounds like maybe they don't always succeed.
Yeah.
And, even when they do try to address those heavier themes, it doesn't sound like they go very deep.
Yeah.
It seems like the focus is more on entertainment
Right.
than on really exploring the issues in a nuanced way.
So if you're looking for a film that's going to make you think really hard about ethics and morality,
Yeah.
this might not be the one.
But if you just want a fun, lighthearted movie with some good performances and a decent message,
Yeah.
then Dragon 2025 could be a good choice.
Exactly. It's all about setting the right expectations.
It is.
Knowing what the film's strengths and weaknesses are going in can help you decide if it's something you'll enjoy.
Exactly, and that's what we hope we've done here today.
Yeah.
We've given you all the information.
The different perspectives.
And now the decision is yours.
So will you be adding Dragon 2025 to your watch list?
Let us know.
We want to hear your thoughts.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world of knowledge with us.
See you next